Today, we are thrilled to feature Stan Fuller, a key figure in transforming the Canadian and U.S. dining landscape. As CEO of Earls Restaurant, Stan has played a crucial role in developing a dining experience in the North American market, spanning 70 locations and employing over 7,000 people. His leadership extends beyond daily operations as he strategically guides Earls through continued growth while maintaining the close-knit family ethos the company was built on back in 1982. In addition to his role at Earls, Stan is also a part owner of Joey and Cactus Club, further showcasing his extensive influence and strategic involvement in the restaurant industry. Alongside notable recipients such as Jennifer Wong, CEO of Aritzia, and former Coastal Front guest and industrial real estate tycoon Ryan Beatty, Stan's innovative leadership earned him the Business in Vancouver BC CEO Award in 2019. Today, we're going to explore the following: the founding of Earls and the evolution of the restaurant industry over the years, challenges faced by the hospitality sector today, including what I describe as the shift to an eat-from-home trend, labor shortages and rising food costs, and finally, Stan's vision for the future of Earls and the restaurant industry as a whole. Stan, welcome to Coastal Front. It's fantastic to have you here.
It's great to be here. Happy to chat.
Great. So maybe before we talk about Earls, tell us the story about A&W.
My father secured the rights to open the A&Ws in Edmonton, Alberta. And they thought he'd maybe have 2 or 3 locations there. He ended up with 14. I think it had a little bit to do with the oil boom out of Leduc, and people wanted to spend, and pretty soon he had A&W operators from around North America coming up in 40 below weather, circling the lot over and over again, just trying to wait for a stall to come open. Wow. So he was a very great promoter. He really knew his food stuff. It was a pretty simple menu compared to what we do today, but he was in good locations, and so he grew that. He created another company called Control Foods. They went public with a bunch of other A&W operators, and he tried to retire, but unfortunately that didn't work out for him because the president that they hired lost a whole bunch of money for the first few years. And so he had to go in and take the reins again, and out of that, we decided to start another business called Fuller's Restaurant, which was sort of Denny's kind of style operation, 24 hours, and that's where I started down at 70th and Marine.
Wow.
And
what give us a time frame on when that was started?
Oh, that's like 40 years ago.
Okay.
It was a miserable business, believe me, because it's a 24-hour business. You don't want to be there. And a coffee shop business, people come in and they drink 10 cups of coffee and smoke 10 cigarettes, and you're not making much money. So, but as we got into it, we built quite a few of those, and I went from running that one to also the one in Surrey. Then he moved me over to take over Alberta, and then pretty soon Ontario.
Okay.
And
were these all under the Fuller brand at that time?
It was under the Fuller brand, but the brand was losing $1 million a year, and within 2 years we had it making $1 million. So that was a really good news story.
Okay.
But they were tough to run and hard to get managers, because who doesn't show up? The graveyard shift manager.
Right, sure.
They don't show up. And now your manager is coming in and doing the graveyard and then working the day shift. And pretty soon his significant other says, forget it, or we're done.
Yeah.
And so the turnover was high, but we still did really well. And we sort of got out of the coffee shop business and made our first foray into a higher-end menu and higher-end decor.
Okay.
So, and that's what started the whole thing that led us down the path to doing Earls.
Okay. Where was the first Earls location, and what year did it open? Who opened it?
The first Earls was in Toronto on Eglinton Street. It was 1982.
Okay.
It was a restaurant that they had that had been a Mexican restaurant. And so we went in and redesigned it. And I used to live on the West Side and play some rugby over there. So Rest Days was our big go-to place on a Thursday night. So we made sure that this restaurant had not only a dining area, but a front area with fun furniture, and then a full square bar. And it took a while to get it going, about 3 months, but then we had lineups.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Started on Wednesday and went right through Sunday. And amazing.
And when you look at those early days of success with that very first Earls restaurant, having made some success in your dad's earliest days of A&W, and then these struggles through the years of having the fuller restaurants, what do you think was the key metric or reason for this first Earls really taking off? Was it the location? Was it the concept? Was it a whole bunch of things? What was it?
Well, we got lucky.
Oh, yeah?
Because my dad's public company went broke and got bought by George Tidball of the Keg.
Okay.
And that would lead to George going broke later. But we pulled out 4 of these Fullers and decided we were going to open another concept. And it was 1982, 83. The economy was on its back, 18 to 21% interest rates. And the menu was very simple, but people still wanted the experience. And we were selling a draft beer for $1.25 and a giant burger for $3.25.
Okay.
And it didn't take the young people long to figure out. And we hired young people, young enthusiastic people.
Yeah.
It all started right from there.
That doesn't sound like luck to me. Chance favors the well-prepared and those that are experienced. What are some of the lessons or values that your father instilled on you? He passed away a few years ago in 2019, if I got that right.
Yes.
And he must have instilled some core values for you and your family that you still stick to today. What are some of those things? Location.
He was always very strong on quality, and he was always very strong on treating people well and fairly, and he had that record in the A&W business. So
yeah,
and that and you see it, you see the loyalty, you see the brightness of the people, the talent that want to be in, and it works, and it's an amazing recipe for success.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned before we started filming that I married an Earls girl back when I was going to Earls more frequently before I became a father of 3 young kids. But now we're finally going back now that they're old enough to eat at a restaurant that you'd want to take them to. I met my wife, Crystal, who's now the dentist, but she worked at Earls in Tin Palace in Calgary. And she has really very fond memories of working there, just the energy. She said it was a hard working environment, but loved being there.
Well, I married an Earls girl, and she worked at the Tin Palace in North Vancouver.
Oh, really?
And I've got 5 kids.
And you got 5.
So it's worked out very well.
Yeah. You were mentioning to me that you ran into some ladies recently when you were in Kelowna?
I was in Kelowna. We have a giant golf tournament there for all our GMs and regionals, and then a host of our biggest suppliers. And we do 2 days of golf, which everybody is absolutely so tired from.
Yeah.
And but it's a huge event. Everybody wants to be there and always has a great time. So we were in Kelowna, and I happened to walk by where we were staying, the pool patio, and there was 6 or 7 girls that worked at the North Vancouver Earls, and they still vacation together up in Kelowna once a year in the summertime, and they have been doing that for about 8 or 9 years.
And they don't even work at Earls anymore.
And they haven't worked at Earls for a long time. But the people, a lot of our people end up selling real estate because the disciplines are the same. Mm-hmm. You're very honest with your clientele. You're very courteous, and you make sure that you're asking the right questions so that people get the right home or get the right sale. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of the same skills.
Yeah. I grew up on Vancouver Island in Port Alberni as my youth, and then later on in Victoria in my high school and university years, and been here in Vancouver for over half my life now. And So I've got a lot of these small town friends that love to come over to Vancouver every now and then. And what I find interesting is, and many of those towns now have an Earls nearby, like for example in Nanaimo. And when they come here, there's so many great places to eat, right? In Vancouver, we've got quite a broad array of. They always want to go to Earls, and I always find it so interesting. And I wonder if it's maybe just because when you go to Earls, and I can speak to this myself because I've been through the prairie provinces at times, and I'm not sure where I want to go eat. I'll go to Earls because I know what my meal is going to be like, and I know what the service is going to be like. I know what the cleanliness of the restaurant is going to be like. So I've got to think that kind of expectation is probably what draws a lot of your customers to come back over and over again.
That and the fact that we keep investing in our locations. After 10 years, we renovate.
Right.
And we learned a long time ago. I mean, we started with a tiny menu. The menu's not tiny anymore.
Yeah.
And we change. I don't know, a quarter of it, a third of it every year, and we've got a test kitchen over at the test kitchen on Hornby and Smythe, and we've got a crew of very talented chefs, 4 of them, that's all they do is just work on new recipes and perfect them, test them, and make sure that nothing gets out that isn't going to meet our standards.
Yeah, great. When you look at other successful businesses, like say, for example, Costco, and I fail to remember the CEO's name right now, but I know the current and former CEOs of Costco have all been adamant that they're going to keep their $1.50 hot dog. Like there's a lot of things that can change at Costco, but one thing's not going to change. IKEA is notorious for the same thing with their Swedish meatballs. Is there anything about any core sort of aspects to Earls Restaurants that if I were to go into one of Stan Fuller's Earls Restaurants 20 years from now, I can expect the same thing I see today? Like, is there anything that you guys...
a hamburger for sure, but also chicken fingers.
Yeah.
Like, those aren't leaving anytime soon, and because they hit such a broad array of young people, but also people with families and young children. And it just makes everything easy for the parents when... the kids are excited and happy.
Yeah, great. Okay, this has been a great intro on Earls. I want to come back to Earls and your vision for the future of both the company and the industry as a whole. But I want to pivot now, Stan, and talking a bit about the challenges that this industry has been facing. We're hopefully going to have Ian Tostenson on. He was actually supposed to come on last week, but we had to reschedule. So we're going to have him coming in to talk about the industry, as you know him well, I'm sure. My mom used to work as a controller in the industry, working for a brand called O'Donnell's years ago. And she always told me there's basically 3 major costs to running any kind of restaurant industry business. So and I believe this is the right order. The highest cost is food first, if I recall. Maybe I'm wrong. Then labor, and then rent. But those are the 3 big costs. Have I got that right or not?
Used to be that way. It's pivoted.
Okay.
And now our highest cost is labor.
Okay.
Because of all the minimum wage increases and benefits, and then it's food, and then alcohol cost, and then it's rent.
Okay, we're going to talk about those 3, Stan. But before we do, I want to talk about the trend that was kind of developed over COVID, which I call the eat at home trend. And one of my observations, again, I'm just an outside guy not working in this industry, but it seems as though a lot of businesses like yours still have to continue to pay these rents, yet your restaurants aren't necessarily full because people still want to eat from home. They're getting food delivery to home. I don't know if this has been a good thing or a bad thing for your industry. It obviously helped keep you afloat, and the industry as a whole is afloat during COVID. But now that we're back to kind of more normal times, are you seeing people going back to the restaurant? Is this been a good thing, being able to, do a DoorDash order?
We might have gone broke without the takeout business. We got it up to 20% of our old sales, and what that enabled us to do is to hold on to our general managers, chefs, our sous chefs, and our assistant managers. And they work pretty well in hourly positions and doing all this food and the takeout. But then when things finally opened up again, we were able to pivot faster than everybody else because we had all our trainers still on board.
Right.
And it was a great strategy, and it put us way ahead. And the takeout is still a big part of our business. Over 10% of our sales is still takeout now.
So pre-COVID,
and it doesn't
what would
hurt
it have
our
been?
inside sales.
It doesn't?
No,
Okay.
it doesn't hurt our inside sales.
So it's been a net accretive to the bottom line.
It's been accretive. It's been a great thing.
Okay.
We're back to.
Would that
we're pretty
apply-
well back to our old. We are back to our old sales.
On in-store?
We're not over what we did last year, but we're right on it.
As far as in-store is concerned?
Yes.
And then is your takeout business now higher than pre-COVID?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you think that's uniquely for Earls? Or, I mean, you've got obviously other brands like Joey's and Cactus Club. Are they seeing the same numbers?
Yes.
Okay. What about small operators out there, the one-off, restaurant operator? How do you think they're feeling the effect of takeout? Has that benefited them as well, do you think?
The smart ones.
The smart ones, yeah.
The ones that aren't smart. I mean, you need every penny coming in because of that rent factor.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've got packaging costs, but on the other hand, you don't have to wash the dishes and
Right.
and do all those things. And
Yeah.
so it's good business for us. Yeah.
Okay.
And we've had to learn a lot. And the ones who have learned how to do the right packaging, keep the hot food hot, cold food cold, and make sure, which is a very difficult thing when it's
Yeah.
being, it's a half an hour to get it to somebody's front door, but we rarely get any complaints.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, that's good. I was under the impression it was the opposite, so it sounds like it's been a net benefit. I mean, for sure it would have, I can see how it would have benefited the industry to keep it afloat during COVID, but it's nice to hear that that you've got back to same store sales levels as pre-COVID, and yet your takeout is equal or higher than it was before, so that's great. You mentioned that labor costs now are actually a greater factor than even food, which is amazing because if you look at Stats Can numbers that just came out today, actually, we've now seen inflation. I mean, I don't know how many people believe this, but inflation's gone from 2.9 to 2.7, largely driven by finally a smaller increase in food costs because the year-over-year food costs for April 2024 to 2023 is now only 1.7% apparently, but that's off the backs of like 2 years of massive food increases, which David Long from Greater Vancouver Food Bank spoke to us about. So it's not like food cost increases haven't been astronomical in the last 2 years, yet you're telling me labor costs are even greater still right now.
It's pretty well flipped. We used to run a 36.5% cost of sales and a 27 labor. Now we're running a 25 cost of sales and a 37.5 labor.
Wow.
So and that's minimum wage and benefits and all that. I mean,
Sure.
we've just been pushed into it.
Yeah.
And it makes it hard for the smaller guys. That it makes it tough. It made it tough.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue into one of my other theories related to this is that, like many other industries, such as the banking industry, the insurance industry, the airline industry, I see what I observe as a consolidation within the restaurant industry. That there's companies like yours, and this is not a negative or positive. It's just a shift in this sort of environment of the hospitality industry. So I see an observation that companies like Earls, Boston Pizza, and other large brand names have economies of scale when it comes to having many operations versus the one-off operator. Do you see a continued closing of restaurants in our industry today as far as like these one-off locations and maybe a broadening of the bigger brands like Earls out there?
I don't think so necessarily. I think the good independent operators will be around in 20 years.
Yeah.
And because they know what to do and they know how to do it right, and they're shoulder to shoulder with their guests. So it's the people that just think, oh, this is a good idea and it's going to be easy, and they get friends and family to invest money, and unfortunately they lose it all.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to the labor costs, you have multiple locations all across Canada and the United States, and you've talked about how that labor cost is the highest factor now. Now, I think about here in British Columbia, we have a fairly significant, I think we have the highest minimum wage in Canada. Have I got that right?
Yes, sir.
And then in addition to that, this current BC NDP government passed on the cost of MSP to the employer through the employer health tax. I got to think that this jurisdiction in British Columbia has got to be one of the most expensive in the country, maybe in North America to run, but maybe I'm wrong. What's your observation on that?
I believe it is, yes. Ontario's more progressive. Alberta's always been extremely progressive, and the other prairie provinces are always very progressive too. So BC's a different beast, but everybody else has got to compete under the same
everybody's on
standards.
the same ice surface. So okay. Where would you say, because you're also in the United States, where would you say, is there any particular, maybe it's Alberta, is there any particular jurisdiction where it's kind of business friendly for you guys?
Well, Alberta for sure, Ontario for sure.
Yeah.
We're doing really well in Boston. In fact, we're going to open 2 more stores there.
Okay.
We're opening 2 more in Miami. So these big city centers are.
So what makes them more appealing for you? I mean, as Chip Wilson said when he was a guest on here, he said, "Money goes to where it's most loved." We were actually, it's a great saying. I mean, I use it all the time now. You know, we were talking about real estate, and he was talking about how, you know, there was an opportunity at, you know, when his transition out of Lululemon, he had a chance to invest in real estate in Vancouver, and most of that money went to investing in real estate in Washington State, because, like he said, money goes where it's most loved. I mean, you and your family have the opportunity to open up any location. You could open up another location in Vancouver, but you're choosing to open up in Boston, Miami. So if someone like a policymaker or a politician's listening to this, hearing from a CEO of a major franchise, or not, excuse me, a major brand, what would you say to them? Like, what's causing you to want to invest more money down there? Like, what is the reasons that cause you to say, that's a great market for us, far better than what we're doing here in Vancouver, as an example?
Well, the fact of the matter is we've built too many restaurants in British Columbia and Alberta.
Okay.
And all 3 of us. So we've really got all the bases covered. And I mean, and part of our secret is Jeff gets up every day and wants to kill Earls, and I want to get up every day and kill Joey. And it's the same with Cactus. So we're competing heavily, and it's a very interesting dynamic, one that I've never heard of before. But it's
So it's more about I guess market share in a sense. You can go into a new market where you don't have this local competition, and there's an opportunity there. It sounds like.
Exactly. So, and also we're getting better at looking at the demographics of where we're going to open. And so we look at population, household income, alcohol spend.
Yeah.
There's about 15, 18 things we look at for every location that we look at.
Yeah.
And then some things are just a bit obvious, like Boston, it's got 34 universities.
Right.
You know, like
good point.
MIT, Harvard, like the streets are paved with gold, as I like to say. So why wouldn't you build more places there? And,
sure. That's a good point.
And that's the same. We're going to Miami. I mean, look at Miami.
Yeah.
It's in the south. It has great weather.
Yeah.
It is really starting to hum with South Americans coming north and Europeans going south.
Yeah.
And it's only for them a 6-hour flight. It's like us going to Toronto.
Right.
So we just see Miami as being a tremendous city for entertainment and opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, great. What's it like going down to a jurisdiction like Miami from the lens of getting approvals and permitting to be able to open up a restaurant versus here in BC or in Vancouver, as well as the labor costs that we've talked about, and not just the cost of labor, but the associated costs like taxes and employee health benefits or employer health tax benefits?
Well, Florida is one of those states where actually it's cheaper. And people have more money because there's no income tax there. by the state.
Right.
It says they're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And so people have more jingle in their jeans, and they want to come out more. And that's the kind of behavior we're seeing. And then you've got this influx of people that are coming in, and they want to, they're on holiday. They want to go out every day.
Right.
And we're just going to open a store in Waikiki in 2 years, and same thing.
Oh,
people
fun.
are coming in for 10 days, and they're going out every single day.
Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of Hawaii, my brother Jeff and I negotiated a deal where we bought a third of the Monkey Pod restaurants.
Really?
Yes. That's very exciting for us.
That is exciting. Wow. Maybe you could bring a Monkey Pod to Vancouver.
Well, we're looking in San Francisco right now.
Actually. Oh, yeah? Yeah. It's one of my wife, Crystal, and I have 3 children, 12, 10, and 8. And I think we go to Monkey Pod like every third night when we're in Maui, up in the Kanapali area, because it's such a great place to eat as a family. It's got a very similar feel to Earls, actually. Just a little more Hawaii.
No, it's great. They're great operators too, and
it's the Merriman family, I think, they own it. Right?
Merriman and and he is a great chef, and he's got very high standards.
Yeah,
and he's really fun to know too. So it's and they're just that group just took over the restaurant at the Westin in Kanapali.
Oh, is that right?
And they're opening a restaurant called the Ulu Kitchen.
Which
is going to be very exciting.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we've talked about the labor cost and how BC has the highest labor cost by way of the minimum wage, plus you've got your employer health tax. Maybe let's talk a bit more about the cost of just being able to get approvals. I mean, I've heard from a lot of other business owners in various industries here in Vancouver that permitting, when I talk to, you guys can refresh my memory for Kits Eyewear is, you can look up the CEO for Kits. Yeah, Roger Hardy, thank you. So we'll cut that part out, okay. As an example, I talked to Roger Hardy about when he was trying to open up his flagship location down at Kits Beach, across from Local. Used to be a Starbucks coffee shop. He wanted to turn it into Kits Coffee Shop. He had to carry the rent on that place for 9 months. Now, granted, this was under the old municipal council under Kennedy Stewart and under Ken Sim. But what's your observation of as far as permitting approval here in Vancouver versus other locations?
My opinion is that we're not nearly as bad off as the developers.
Okay. Where
they used to be able to go in and get permit for a big tower in a year. They're into 4-5 years now, and they've got to carry all that property.
Yeah.
And they've got to do all that, and then that just raises the prices of all the product they have to sell, and the poor people, are in a way being overcharged because of that inefficiency.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping. I really like Ken Sim, and I'm really hoping that he's going to get that approval time.
Yeah.
Back down to a year and a half at some point.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah. Let's talk about food costs. Now, we've been seeing some massive increases, albeit today's latest Stats Can announcement came out saying that the year-over-year food costs have only gone up by 1.7%. Now, thereby bringing down the overall inflation rate to 2.7. That just came out. Got printed this morning. But we've seen massive double-digit increases for 2 years consecutively in food costs, which is why I'm almost surprised that your labor costs are higher than your food costs, because these food costs have just been going through the roof. How have you and your group at Earls managed to kind of deal with that?
We've got a miracle worker in Claudia Vorlaffer, and we have a big team that's negotiating all those things all the time. But even
Claudia is, just to give you context,
she's our procurement VP.
Okay.
And so we work these things pretty hard. But I mean, French fries, they've just decided that, we're gonna raise the prices 40 or 50% because we've kind of got a monopoly over, and we said, well, we're going to go somewhere else. And so we we ended up being 25% more.
Yeah.
And now I look at what we have to charge for French fries. It's not right, but
Yeah.
what can we do? It's a staple of what people want when they're coming out to a restaurant. Not too many people have a deep fryer in their own home, so
Yeah.
when they go out, they like to partake.
Yeah. And when you have those kind of cost increases, ultimately you either have to absorb it yourself and have lower profits, or in some cases maybe even losses, or you've got to pass it on to your customer. I mean,
Yeah, we pass it on. We just try and break even.
Yeah.
And that's where with the independents you even get a little bit more of an advantage over time, because you keep negotiating those things and they're not able to, and
Right.
And so they're bearing that bigger burden. So in their operation, food costs might be more than staffing costs.
Staffing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about rent and how much of an impact that is in this industry. Is that a major factor for you today? I know in certain markets like Vancouver, it seems like the retail commercial space is actually hurting right now, which means it'd be good for your business, because if you're renting a spot, it should be less costly for you. But what are your thoughts on cost of locations?
We're actually in good shape because our rent is just a factor that goes into an equation that also includes sales. And you don't look at rent just as rent. You look at rent as a percentage of your sales. And we have certain standards that we like to hit there, and we do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as big a factor, but for an independent, again, it could be.
Yeah. I've touched on labor costs, and we've touched on food costs and rent. Is there any other sort of headwinds that you're facing today in this industry that we haven't touched on yet?
I don't believe so. I mean, it's just that we've outgrown our space in Western Canada, and so we need to grow in Toronto, which is one of the big 7 cities in North America, and then we need to go more into the U.S. So and that's very exciting. I mean, on a whole bunch of fronts, because it dissipates our risks that we're taking, and I mean, let's face it, the Americans take home more money.
Yeah.
And they deduct their mortgage, like
right.
I said before. So it's a huge
well, as Reed
advantage.
was just saying before we were filming, he'd eat at Earls more if he wasn't taxed so much. And I think we all would. So, I mean, do you have an opinion on that? I mean, we're kind of stepping outside of your industry, but just Stan, do you have any views on, your father's originally from the United States, if I'm correct?
Yes.
And you're obviously well invested in your business in the United States. You see that environment down there. You see it here in Canada. I mean, I firmly believe we're overtaxed in this country. I don't believe the government needs more of our money. I think they just need to do what they've got with do better with what they've already got. I think they need less of our money. But do you have an opinion on this?
My opinion would mirror yours.
Okay.
That they should do with less, and they don't need it, and it's just a cycle that they get into. And what an easy way. And the Trudeau government is just typical. They're going to raise the capital gains again and so that's going to take money out of people's pockets.
Yeah. I think this latest one, this capital gains increase that you're referring to, I think is one that anybody who's a business owner, professional, such an accountant, lawyer, doctor, dentist, they're feeling that and seeing it. But I just wonder how many people really understand the implications of this capital gains tax. It's a real salt in the wound for a lot of people.
It sure is.
Yeah.
And you're going to, we're going to build more in the States than in Canada.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
Right.
And,
yeah.
It takes a while, but it will have an effect.
Yeah.
And, when everyone's starting to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think these governments have to get smaller and not bigger.
Yeah.
And just like these carbon taxes. I mean, all the rest of the world is actually not charging them.
Yeah.
And we're going to save the world, little Canada, by putting a big tax on our people for heating oils or gasoline or anything else. Where does this nonsense come from?
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, you're preaching to the converted. I wonder if we have enough people though coming up to this. We're not going to see a federal election here until end of it's going to be October of next year. If people are, hopefully we'll have enough people to kind of see the light that more money in their pocket, then they have more choices.
Well, I think it's become very stark because there's one party out there that says they're going to get rid of the carbon taxes. I mean, and when you think about carbon tax, that's not only what you're putting in your car. That's what every truck that comes in here bringing produce or shirts or sweaters or pants, anything they're using gas. And so it just makes everything more expensive. And that's one of the reasons, you go down to the States and fill up your car, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
And that's just another tax.
Yeah, you're absolutely
lower
right.
income, but hey, the gas tax down there is almost nothing.
Yeah.
And they'd probably have a giant revolt if they ever tried to increase it too, by the way.
Would, yeah. One of my observations as well in the political spectrum federally is the amount of money that our tax dollars go towards subsidizing particular industries, which I don't think you've ever had a luxury of, I don't imagine.
No.
So you look at like locally here in BC, we really subsidize the film and movie industry, where it's quite interesting. Like you could be employing some great people here in BC, and a film and movie industry can be employing them, and they'll get, I think the number's like 30 or 40 cents on the dollar back in tax credits for employing the same people that you would employ in your restaurants, and you don't get any tax credits. You go back east and you look in towns like Oshawa, where these former GM and Ford car plants are, and got these companies that are so-called making investments in EV manufacturing facilities, but it was only because they're being given literally hundreds of millions of dollars by our federal government, which is really your tax dollars and my tax dollars. As an entrepreneur myself, I've never been a recipient of this. So I wonder if you have any opinion of how some industries get this benefit of these massive tax subsidies, or they get rebates or whatever it might be, and then others like yours. I don't think the restaurant hospitality industry has ever been received any kind of tax benefits.
No, and it's always, it's called getting elected, and so that's why you see it going on in Ontario and in Ottawa, because they feel like if they're creating jobs, that they're going to get a certain amount of the population that are voting for them, which goes to stand. But it's to me, it still doesn't make sense. I liked when Polyev went to on one side of Windsor, and then he went down to the U.S. side, and the house was less than half price.
Right.
That makes a big difference.
It does.
And we've got to have more politicians that point these things out and say, you're getting ripped off here.
Yeah.
The other thing that's Pierre Elliott Trudeau with Eugene Whalen in their wisdom way back in the day created marketing boards. And so we're just going through another chicken increase. And who's making that increase? It's the chicken growers.
Yeah.
Who own the whole thing. And there's no one to stand in their way, and they've just decided they want a 16 or whatever % increase, and they're pushing it through.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. Stan, I mentioned before we were filming that I got a chance to call it to my grandfather last night. We celebrated his 100th birthday earlier this year. He watched the Canucks game 7 last night, and he's been a stark critic of supply management, which is what you're talking about. We've seen it in the poultry industry, we see it in the dairy industry. I mean, the dairy farmers, this is a very well-known fact, a typical dairy farmer across Canada will make somewhere between 20 to 30% more in profits than any other kind of farmer, because they have the supply management, sort of benefit. That we literally, they have a quota, they have their license, their quota, and they get to have these elevated prices. That's why Canadians go across the border, even with a cheap Canadian dollar, and still can buy milk, eggs, and cheese across a border town than here in Canada. I got to think this impacts it probably goes back to why you're opening more stores in the United States.
It's part of it. And you're exactly right, and you're dead on.
Yeah.
It is so accurate.
And it's not like, and then the people who support this model say, well, you know, if you go to the American model, then we're going to have nothing but like, you know, we'll have just, you know, hormone induced milk. I'm like, well, no, you can still have regulations that say like the dairy farmers can't, you know, add hormones to their cows or whatever you want to say, without having to have supply management. Things like poultry and chicken.
You need competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we have to compete. You know, like,
yeah.
Why don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
How else are you going to find a fair market?
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of the U.S. model. To spend the last few minutes here, let's talk about your vision for Earls, and let's talk about your view of where you think the hospitality restaurant industry is heading. And again, being that most of our viewers and listeners are here in Metro Vancouver, maybe you can talk more locally about that. About the second piece, about like where do you sort of see things going? And I'm going to start with an opening question. If you were 25 years old today, and mom and dad gave you a little bit of money, and some friends and family gave you a little bit of money, and you had enough just to open up one restaurant, would you open up a restaurant here in 2024 in Vancouver?
I'd go to Florida.
You go to Florida?
I would.
Yeah.
I'd move.
So
down
the answer
there.
is no.
Yes.
Okay.
Doesn't make the same sense.
Because my observation would be similar to yours. I'm not in your industry, but it seems to me that you got to be taking a lot of risk to put your house on the line to open up a restaurant and be in the hospitality industry here in BC today. Just seems like there's a lot of risks in front of you, and it sounds like you have the similar opinion.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's self-cleaning. I mean, there's only so much business to be had, and some people need to get out.
So do you think the market is saturated, or is it maybe also a function of we don't have enough people going out, we don't have enough tourists coming? I mean, we finally got cruise ships coming back here, but is that a factor at all, Stan, that maybe it's not so much the build out of too many restaurants and too many seats, but maybe it's a factor also of not having enough people having money to be able to dine because of the taxes?
It's disposable income.
Uh-huh.
It's taxation. I mean, everybody, you get on that curve where you lower the taxes and people can afford to go out more, so there's more employment.
Yeah.
People can afford to do improvements on their home,
yeah.
and get the service guys working, and they do well and they pay more taxes, and it's a cycle, and it can go one way or the other. And unfortunately, we're in a bad cycle right now, both federally and provincially.
Do you must track things like average spend at a store or a restaurant?
Yes, sir.
And have you seen that number decline at all? Like, are people spending less? Have you seen it actually?
No.
They're not.
They're not.
Okay.
Our guest counts are down, but our average spend is up.
So guest counts are down, but average spend is up. So those who can afford to eat out will spend more, but there's a large part of the market maybe who are not even dining right now.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or less frequently.
Mm-hmm. Less frequently. Okay, so your vision for the next 5-10 years, where do you sort of see things going with Earls? And you've got 70 stores mostly in Canada today?
Mostly in Canada.
What's the breakdown between Canada and the States, roughly?
I think we've got 10 in the U.S. right now, and all the rest are in Canada.
So huge opportunity in the States.
Huge, yeah. No, it's monumental. And as I've said, we know where we need to go now, and now I just need to fight with my brother and the guy that runs Cactus to get the best locations. So,
okay.
And again, it's still that fundamental location.
Yeah.
And because, we're on profit share with our GMs and our chefs, and so
on a localized basis. So there's a profit share for.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a smart model.
Yeah, and
so they're really
the stores that are bigger, the guys start in smaller stores, learn their trade, and then they get moved up to a medium, and then the medium large, and then a large.
Okay.
And but because the sales are more, they make more money all the way up. And, and they like that.
Yeah. If I were to go to Earls in any one of your locations, are they all generally the same menu types?
Pretty much the same. We are just in the process of changing our U.S. menu a bit because the U.S. palate is a little bit different. And in fact, our test kitchen chefs are just going down to L.A. for a little restaurant tour. L.A.'s become quite the restaurant city.
Yeah.
And
so that's curious to me. I mean, other than portion sizes, I never thought about the fact that the American palate might be slightly different. Tell me about that. What makes the American palate slightly different than Canadian?
They eat more red meat. They eat more barbecued ribs. They're bigger eaters. They've got more money.
Yeah.
And I think Canadians are a little bit more health conscious.
Okay.
About weight and all those things. I think Canadians are more disciplined in that arena.
Yeah.
Which is fair and which is good.
Yeah. So going back to your vision for the industry, or where you sort of see a trend happening, are you seeing anything? For example, you touched on earlier the closing of some of these smaller operations that aren't being very well run. Do you see that continuing? Do you see a consolidation of locations, like companies, brands like Earls and Joey's and Cactus, Keg and Boston Pizza becoming more and more profound, and the closure of smaller shops? What do you see happening?
I don't see that happening.
No?
It has nothing to do with that. It's all about the ability of that independent operator to do it right.
Yeah.
And if they do it right and they get a good location, they will be fine. There's
Yeah.
lots of independents. Michelle just sold Le Crocodile to Rob Feeney and some investors. Well, that location will do fine, very much, thank you.
Yeah,
It's a one-off, but it will do very fine.
It's a great restaurant.
Yeah, it's a great restaurant. And so there's lots of independents, and they're doing great. And they don't have to worry. If you're a good operator, and there is discipline to it, and you have to have systems. We have worked overtime in the early days of this company to create training systems, numbers, criteria, rating of performance, all these things. And everybody have a different system, but you have to have a system.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not helping your people the way you should be helping them, and helping them see, because we all have blind spots.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. As a prominent restaurant owner, do you like going out to restaurants yourself, or do you just like eating at home?
In the summer, I like to barbecue.
Yeah.
A lot. In fact, we just did this last weekend, and it was great. But for the most part, I mean, I'm really spoiled. I've got on the North Shore a Joey, a Cactus, a Beach House, and an Earls.
Right.
So,
do you ever eat at restaurants that aren't yours?
Well, sometimes. Yeah. Not very often.
Not very often. Okay. What's your favorite go-to meal for dinner time at Earls?
Very eclectic. I like to try everything on the menu.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit off red meat right now, but that'll change too.
Yeah.
And
do you have your top 3 favorite Earls locations that you love going back to, whether it's for nostalgic reasons or just the environment is something you really enjoy across Canada and the United States?
I love our store in Prudential in Boston.
Okay.
It's upstairs. It is a juggernaut. Big patio. It is really a fun place. We've got the same thing on King Street in Toronto. Really fun. In fact, my oldest son, Keaton, is a bartender there.
Yeah.
And it's epic. And we're actually going to open another one only 9 blocks away in the old Surly location. And we have really ripped that whole place apart and rebuilt it. And then now we're putting in a garden roof on the upper. We're very excited by that one.
Yeah.
And this one we're doing in Miami World, we're excited about. It's going to be a big store. And then Fort Lauderdale, big store.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Wow, great. Well, Stan Fuller, CEO and co-founder of Earls Restaurants, it's been wonderful having you on Coastal Front today. I wish you the best of luck as you continue to expand in the United States. I know my family will continue to enjoy eating at your restaurants. One of our go-to locations is the one on Broadway with the permanent canopies. Was that Broadway and
Fur.
Broadway and Fur?
I used to live on that side, so
did you?
I used to live at that store.
Did you?
Yeah. So,
well, my 12-year-old, she loves steaks, so that's always her go-to choice when we go there. And the other ones like a lot of the little bites to eat. So it's a good restaurant, and I appreciate you coming to the show today. So thank you for your time.
No, thank you for having me, and really enjoyed the chat.